Yeah, that's what I see in both of you. You reflect your work through the eyes of your children. You do it with a responsibility to them, maybe in some cases, whether you realize it or not, because you're both strong fathers.
I've never seen anything like that. I thought everybody was dead.
Hey
Yes.
everybody, Ulysses Butch here with Building Community, Chester Housing Authority's online platform for staying in contact with our residents, staff, stakeholders, and all those people around the world who love this award-winning show, Building Community. I'm here with, as always, Executive Director of the Chester Housing Authority, Steve Fischer. Steve, this is a great idea. I want to be clear that this was your idea. People always think these are my ideas, but this is one of yours. Thank you for coming up with this idea, Steve. What are we talking about today?
Well, it occurred to me that I know at least three people, including myself, that have dabbled in filmmaking with a certain purpose, and that would be to bring to light the Black experience in this country. And there are divergent ways you can go to illustrate that, and both of you, have done it in different ways. So I thought getting you together in the same room could be enlightening to a lot of people. It's not necessarily just the final product, which both of you have produced creative stuff, but it's also all the stuff that leads up to getting that out, and making sure that it's quality production. So you're two local guys that can speak to that, and I think people will be interested in hearing from you.
Mm-hmm.
Bilal Motley and Ulysses Butch.
Well, I think people have heard my name and my voice enough on this show, but we have a new guest. This is the first time he's been with us, and it's a pleasure to see you again. Mr. Bilal Motley, welcome to Building Community.
Yes, thanks for having me. Yes, my name is Bilal Motley. I was born in Mississippi, Natchez, Mississippi, but my dad's from Chester, Pennsylvania. And it's a long story about Mississippi, but my mom in 1970 practically ran away from Mississippi. She was our own great migration. Like, she just said, I can't do this anymore in the 70s, because they were still struggling with integrating the schools down there, even in 1970. So she found out she had an aunt up here and said, I'm moving to Chester. I'm going to Chester. And she came by herself at 14. And that's where she met my dad. So yes, Chester, Pennsylvania is in my blood. I spent 15 years at oil refinery in South Philly. It was the formerly Sunoco refinery when it was, and then it exploded in 2019, and I was there when it happened. And I made my first film, Midnight Oil, based around that. It was a short documentary. And for years, I was trying to be a filmmaker, meaning, as a screenwriter, applying to all these Sundance and all these other things, being rejected. And all my screenwriting friends, we were waiting for someone to allow us to do something. But it wasn't until the events came to me, and I said, enough of this. I have enough stories, like growing up in Chester, that are in me, like, tell your story, to make it authentic. So that's what I did. So yeah, since then, making films, and I love this region. And yeah, just make films from the heart. And I try to narrow my focus, like, this film is a letter to my son and daughter. You know what I mean? Just narrow my focus instead of try to please everybody like I did for years as a screenwriter. So yeah.
Man, that's powerful stuff already. I've already heard of 3 new films you can write. I love the individual great migration. The way that you talked about that, I'm picturing a 14-year-old girl running from the South. And you say 1970, I was 5 back then. and that Mississippi was still a kind of Mississippi that people would have to run from. I mean, unless people like you tell those stories, people who don't understand those stories will think that Mississippi was something different. So the voice that I'm hearing, man, is just it's just crucial. So I'm gonna back out, Steve. I'm gonna get excited about this. I'm gonna try to contain myself. So
Yeah,
you gotta help
I
me.
mean, I'm already hearing similar themes to your work, especially when he talks about relating his work to his kids. I think both of you do that. I think I see both of your kids through your work. Bilal, you mentioned the Great Migration. You know, we actually did a production at the Housing Authority around that, and a lot of it dwelled on the journey, not of just of one person, but of many people who ultimately arrived in Chester. That was the Ruth L. Bennett story. So that's definitely a fitting subject to bring up when you're talking about Chester, because today's Chester is so much a product of the Great Migration. It's it's pretty much dominated by the successive generations of folks that came out of that.
Yeah, yes, because, and I'm glad you brought that up, because my dad's from the Bennett. He grew up in the Bennett Ruth L. Bennett homes, and also
that would be Big Al Motley, right?
yes, yeah, Big Al, the legend. So then my mentor and former teacher, Miss Twyla Simpkins, was involved in that film, right? So yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
She
so I
worked.
did see that.
She worked on that with us. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. So it's our mentors. So it's just, Chester's such a small town, and I try to, and I like the theme of this, like African American filmmakers, this show, because there is a greater responsibility that I have. I have to walk, like the film I'm just finished. I'm like 99% done on the environmental situation in Chester. I have to walk in that in Chester. My family's still there. You know what I mean? I have to, when I'm telling a story about where I live, it's a greater responsibility. You know what I mean? And with my family still there, so I have to get it right. So I think as an African American filmmaker, it's just a greater, this is added pressure, but it's good pressure because it keeps you accountable. And make sure you're telling stories that are authentic, but are that are honest as well. So,
Hey, Bilal, let me ask you something, man. The responsibility as a filmmaker. This is what I think. I'm curious as to what you think. When I think of responsibility, I think of authenticity, just as you said. I think of memory, because storytelling is about bringing something, in many cases, together that has already transpired. Of course, some films are about the future, but it sounds like me and you are thinking about, when we're making films, bringing stories together about a reality that is now, something that happened, sharing ideas that are oftentimes either ignored very intentionally, because I think the thing that people don't get sometimes is that there are impacts when you tell stories. There are people who don't want to hear a particular story, right? And so the authenticity, the integrity, the honesty are all part of the filmmaking that I do. But then there's also the entertainment part. You got to keep people engaged. You can't just hit them with fact. You can't be so sterile that people fall asleep. And in this day and age, with so much speed, so much content everywhere, from TikTok to YouTube to Vimeo, how and what do you think about as you're developing something like this piece around environmental justice in Chester? How do you put all those pieces together so that your audience watches, listens, and learns?
It's a great question. So it's a challenge. The first thing I do, am I interested in this topic, and do I want to know more? So that's going to keep me engaged. And but also, especially when I'm building stories on my hometown or the region that I'm in, is there something about this story that the public doesn't know? You know what I mean? And I like what you said. The way we approach films, we do it in integrity, honesty, and but somebody's may or may not be unhappy about that product. You know what I mean? What you're making. For instance, the film I made on the refinery exploding in South Philly. I was there for 15 years. It was like 1,000 of us in there. And somehow, and I'm there more than I was at home. And I knew everyone, every single person in there. They don't talk to me anymore because I took a stance, you know what I mean? And maybe a few talk to me, a handful, but if you're going to be honest and do this work correctly, you're going to piss some people off. Now, the artist growing up, listen to James Baldwin or even Tupac or something like that. Oh yeah, an artist doesn't care. They just put it out. No, it does hurt. You know what I mean? When you're being honest, I do miss those guys in a sense, although it was difficult working there. So you have to decide, are you going to tell this? Are you going to tell the heck out of this story? Or are you going to, what I did as a worker at the refinery, I never spoke up. I just wanted to be the perfect Black oil worker. You know what I'm saying? And I was one of the only Black managers. So I kind of was really careful what I said because I had all the brothers be like, oh man, come on, don't mess this up for us. You know what I'm saying? Because I was one of the only Black managers. So it's about, so when I finally spoke up, you know what I mean? Are you ready to deal with the backlash? They were sharing my address. It was heated, because I was probably the only person that spoke out against the place that worked there. I was a manager that worked there. So it was explosive at the time. So are you ready? If you're going to tell these stories authentically, are you ready for that backlash? I wasn't ready then, but, I think that's the risk you take. And I narrow my focus. This is for my son and my daughter. And 50 years from now, they're like, how did daddy feel about the environment? How did daddy feel about, did he tell the truth? Was he brave? You know what I mean? So that's the test I use when I'm, developing a story. You know what I mean? Even though it is uncomfortable, like a few films I'm working on now, it's really uncomfortable when, there's several sides to a story. So yeah.
You go ahead and get into something like filmmaking. That's that's going to become a very public thing.
Our acid unit caught fire.
My daughters are dying. Do you understand? 2 daughters with cancer.
We're not bad people. We're good people.